It's time for me to reveal my top 25 wines of 2024. This will take me a little while, so I'll do it in two parts. In this video, I'll reveal wines 11 through 25. The criteria for inclusion is simple. This is a total meritocracy, so this list is the best of the best. But I also want to hear from all of you, so please be sure to let me know some of your favorite wines from 2024 in the comments below. At the beginning of the year, my tasting group decided to do a tasting of top Bordeaux and Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon from the 1995 vintage. This next wine, namely the 1995 Chateau Margaux, was the winner of that tasting. This is a bit of a structured, austere version of Chateau Margaux that is not quite as flamboyant and generous as what you'll find in some very top vintages of Chateau Margaux. Nevertheless, following a 90-minute decant, this was an extremely impressive wine, and one that won Wine of the Night that night over some fierce competition. This wine featured flavors and aromas of black cherry, red currant, raspberry, plum, violets, and forest floor. If you open this wine in the near future, definitely make sure you give it at least 90 minutes of air, and preferably up to 2 hours or so, as it really does improve with that amount of aeration. It was a humbling experience to walk the J.J. Cohn estate in Napa Valley and taste the 2019 Scarecrow while standing among the old men. Old men is the term that J.J. Cohn grandson and Scarecrow co-founder Brett Lopez affectionately uses to describe the old vine Cabernet Sauvignon in his vineyard. These prized old vines were planted way back in 1945 and are among some of the very oldest Cabernet Sauvignon vines in all of Napa Valley. Brett Lopez and co-founder Mimi de Blasio do not just trust any winemaker with this world-class fruit. Rather, since inception, they've used highly acclaimed winemaker Celia Welch to produce Scarecrow. It's no surprise that many of the vintages of Scarecrow have been highly acclaimed, and the 2019 vintage received 2 100-point scores, both from Jeb Dunnock and from Wine Advocate. I certainly agree that this is an extraordinarily promising wine, and one that I have no doubt will continue to improve and evolve in the years to follow. At this early stage in its life, it was rather primary, but it was still impressive enough to warrant a tie for the number 25 spot with the 1995 Chateau Margaux. Cuvée Louise is Champagne Pommery's prestige cuvée. This is definitely a very underrated champagne in my view. It's particularly impressive because Pommery ages it for an extremely long time on the lees before it's released. For example, the 2006 Cuvée Louise was the current release when I visited Champagne Pommery earlier this year. At that time, I did a tasting with winemaker Clément Pierlot. After we tasted the 2006 Cuvée Louise, Clément went over and rang the bell in the tasting room and said that that's what happens when Cuvée Louise is open. As enjoyable as the 2006 Cuvée Louise was, things got even better when Clément unearthed a magnum of the 1990 Cuvée Louise that he pulled from the depths of the Crayère. From the large format, and especially given the perfect provenance of having been stored in the cool Crayère for decades, this champagne was remarkably fresh and vibrant, and well-deserving of its place in the number 24 slot in my top wines of 2024. In fact, I was so inspired by tasting this 1990 Cuvée Louise from Magnum that I went over and rang the bell as well. Despite being classified as a fifth growth in the 1855 classification of Bordeaux, Pontet-Canet is widely considered to be a super second, or a producer that's capable of producing wines that rival the quality of the first growths in certain strong vintages. Along with the 2009 vintage, the 2010 Pontet-Canet is absolutely one of my favorite all-time vintages of Pontet-Canet. The 2010 Pontet-Canet comes in at number 23 in my top 25 wines of 2024. This wine was produced from organically and biodynamically grown fruit. It's a blend that consists of 65% Cabernet Sauvignon, 30% Merlot, and there's smaller amounts of Cabernet Franc and Petit Verdot. This is a wine that's still extremely youthful, but became very enjoyable with 90 to 120 minutes in the decanter. Flavors and aromas included blackcurrant, blueberry, cedar, forest floor, and mixed herbs. This is a powerful concentrated wine with layers of flavor and a long complex finish. Based in Vosne Romane, Domaine de Mayo focuses on low-intervention winemaking, meticulous vineyard work, and careful oak usage. This results in impressive Burgundy that balances power, elegance, and terroir expression. The Nuits Saint-Georges Au Bordeaux Premier Cru is one of Mayo Camazet's most celebrated Premier Cru wines. This impressive vineyard is located right on the Vosne Romane border. Fruit from this vineyard often gives you the best of both worlds, and oftentimes will show the structure and intensity of Nuits Saint-Georges, as well as the silky elegance of Vosne Romane, making it a standout sight. So the number 22 wine in my top 25 wines this year is the 2006 Domaine de Mayo Nuits Saint-Georges Au Bordeaux Premier Cru. This beguiling Burgundy featured flavors and aromas of blackberry, cherry, wild strawberry, rose petal, and violets. There were fine-grade tannins that were fully integrated, and this wine had a velvety texture with ample acidity and a long, complex finish. Unlike most Chateauneuf du Pape, Rayas is not a blend. Rather, it's 100% Grenache from old, low-yielding bush vines. Earlier this year, a tasting group met and conducted a 7-vintage vertical tasting of Rayas. With one nose, I knew that the outstanding 1999 Rayas was going to be a standout and vie for the top spot of that tasting. Raspberry and wild strawberry were accompanied by licorice, garrigue, mixed spice, and cedar. Oxymoronically, on the palate, this wine was intensely ethereal. There was ample acidity to balance the intense fruit flavors and supple tannins. A breathtaking wine, despite the fact that the 1999 Rayas only finished second in our Rayas vertical tasting. That is good enough to secure the number 21 spot in my top 25 wines of 2024. There is Champagne, and then there is Selosse. Selosse is one of my favorite champagne producers. While I enjoy the entire lineup, Substance is definitely one of my favorites. Substance is a Blanc de Blanc, so it's made from 100% Chardonnay. There's only 3,000 bottles produced each year. This particular bottle that I enjoyed during 2024 was disgorged in September of 2013, and this impressive champagne comes in at number 20 in my top wines of 2024. Interestingly, Substance is the product of a CELLAR system that began way back in 1986. Selosse's goal with Substance is to minimize the impact of vintage variation. There are 2 levels of reserve wines, or criadera, for Substance, one aged in stainless steel and the other in oak cask. Selosse adds to the CELLAR every vintage, regardless of how good or bad a particular vintage may be. The youngest vintage accounts for about 22% of the wine. While the CELLAR system produces a champagne with slightly oxidative qualities and a golden color, there's still a remarkable underlying freshness to this champagne, and it's incredibly complex and profound. This wine is also aptly named as it's a full-bodied, powerful champagne. It's one with an extraordinarily long finish and definitely a wine of quiet contemplation. While the price has unfortunately skyrocketed in the United States, it's one to keep an eye out for if you're in France, and definitely one for your bucket list if you have not tried it yet. Owned and operated by brothers Alex and Graham, Macdonald Vineyards makes one of the most coveted wines in all of Napa Valley, despite the fact that its inaugural vintage was just in 2010. The Macdonald family first planted vines in the legendary Toquelan Vineyard back in 1954. For 60 years, this fruit was sold exclusively to Mondavi and included in some of Mondavi's finest wines. In 2010, however, Macdonald began setting aside some of this fruit and using it for its own bottling. Almost immediately, this wine became one of the most sought-after Cabernet Sauvignons in all of Napa Valley. Earlier this year, I was fortunate to taste a 6-vintage vertical of Macdonald. My favorite of that impressive lineup was the 2013 Macdonald. This is very much classic Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon, and one that was extremely elegant. It's a wine with a sense of place and a soul, and one that's very deserving of its number 19 spot on my top 25 wines of 2024. Laurent-Perrier's Grand Siècle is one of my favorite prestige cuvées, but Laurent-Perrier has a late disgorgement version of Grand Siècle that's even more special than the standard release. So the number 18 wine in my top 25 wines for 2024 is the Laurent-Perrier Grand Siècle Les Reserves iteration number 20. This is basically Grand Siècle number 20, but matured on the lees in Magnum for 20 years before it was released. I was able to taste this special champagne during a visit to Laurent-Perrier earlier this year. This wine is an assemblage of 9 Grand Crus and consists of 54% Chardonnay and 46% Pinot Noir. Rather than creating a single vintage champagne, Laurent-Perrier seeks to recreate the perfect vintage by using the fruit from 3 declared vintages to produce Grand Siècle. For example, iteration number 20 is a blend that consists of fruit from the 1999, 1997, and outstanding 1996 vintage. This champagne was extraordinarily complex, yet also incredibly vibrant. Flavors and aromas included lemon, tangerine, delicate floral notes, and honey intertwined with brioche and almonds. There was a rich, creamy texture and a refined effervescence. I absolutely adore aged champagne due to its complexity, but in Magnum, you can combine that complexity with remarkable freshness to get the best of both worlds. And that's why this wine was already the second champagne from Magnum to make my top 25 wines this year. Way back in 1663, famous diarist Samuel Pepys prepared one of the very first tasting notes after enjoying a glass of wine at the Royal Oak Tavern in London. Specifically, he described the wine as having, quote, a good and most particular taste that I never met with, close quote. More than 350 years later, I feel the exact same way whenever I'm able to enjoy a glass of Haut-Brion. Despite being 38 years old, the 1986 Haut-Brion is so youthful that it almost seems to be aging in reverse, like Benjamin Button. This wine is a blend that consists of 62% Cabernet Sauvignon, 28% Merlot, and 10% Cabernet Franc. This wine benefited from an hour in the decanter and then kept getting stronger as the night wore on. My tasting note for this wine described it as follows. Aristocratic aromatics abound. Mixed red and black fruit, violets, licorice, leather, gravel. Cuban cigar, graphite, smoke, and hints of forest floor. On the palate, this wine is well-balanced yet powerful, with soft, refined tannins and a long, lingering finish. If you have this wine in your cellar, there's certainly no rush, as it has a long life ahead of it, but there's certainly no need to wait as well, as it's showing extraordinarily well right now, which makes this wine the number 17 wine in my top 25 wines of 2024. If you're interested in wine recommendations, wine collecting strategies, and learning more about wine, please do subscribe to my channel. I've been collecting wine for more than 15 years and also have a level 4 diploma from the WSET. So I have both formal certification as well as substantial practical knowledge from the School of Hard Knocks. Mouton Rothschild is a first growth in the 1855 classification of Bordeaux, but that was not always the case, as it started out as a second growth. It ultimately was elevated in 1973. Earlier this year, we did a comparison of some top expressions of right bank and left bank Bordeaux from the 1998 vintage. One of the wines included in that tasting was the outstanding 1998 Mouton. The 1998 Mouton is a candidate for wine of the vintage from 1998, and I've always been extremely impressed with this wine. Despite the fact that this wine finished second in our tasting, it comes in at number 16 in my top wines of 2024. Initially tight, this wine was simply stunning with 3 hours of air, and it kept getting stronger as the night wore on. This wine was opulent and concentrated with a purple hue. Flavors and aromas included blackberry, plum, menthol, cedar, mixed spice, tobacco, and pencil lead, a sultry, seductive wine that was extremely enjoyable. Coming in at number 15 in my top 25 wines of 2024 is the 2012 Domaine Roulot Meursault Premier Cru Meursault. Roulot is definitely one of my favorite producers of Meursault, in part because there's an emphasis on purity of fruit, precision, and minerality. When this wine was opened, people were a little bit nervous about whether or not it may have some slight premature oxidation, but as soon as we opened this bottle, we knew that those concerns were totally unfounded. This wine was absolutely stunning. This wine featured layered flavors of lemon, white peach, green apple, white flowers, chamomile, crushed almonds, flint, whetstone, and brioche. While the 1998 Chateau Trotanoy did not receive the most first-place votes in our recent Bordeaux battle, it was number 1 on my scorecard, and that makes it the number 14 wine in my top 25 wines of 2024. As soon as this wine was poured in the decanter, explosive aromatics erupted, and I could smell it from 4 to 5 feet away. But yet, this wine was still a little bit tight and closed initially, and it required 2 hours in the decanter before it opened up and started to show its best. This wine featured flavors and aromas of blackberry, blackcurrant, cherry, plum, cedar, licorice, graphite, and chocolate. As impressive as this wine was, it still is likely not even at peak yet, so if I had this bottle in my cellar, I'd probably try to wait a little bit longer before I enjoyed it, and it certainly has a long life ahead of it yet. For centuries, Chateau Latour has produced world-class wines. It was a favorite of President Thomas Jefferson's back in the 1780s, and it received first growth status in the official 1855 classification of Bordeaux. Earlier this year, we tasted the 1990 Chateau Latour. Despite being more than 3 decades old, this wine still has plenty of structure to support additional aging and has a long life ahead of it. Nevertheless, it's already in a tremendous place, and with a couple hours of aeration, it was definitely a wine that was memorable enough to be number 13 in my top 25 wines of 2024. Dominant descriptors for the 1990 Latour included blackcurrant, blackberry, tobacco, cedar, cigar smoke, and there was also a gravelly, minerally quality to this wine. On the palate, this wine was regal and refined, but in a powerful, masculine way. Dark, brooding, and incredibly complex, this wine kept morphing in the glass and revealed something new every time I checked on it, which I did early and often. Based in Côte-Rôtie in the northern Rhône region of France, Domaine de Guigal makes some of my all-time favorite wines. While I enjoy many of the Guigal wines at various price points, the crown jewel in the lineup is absolutely the Lala trilogy, which consists of La Mouline, La Landon, and La Turque. La Turque is generally a blend that consists of around 93% Syrah and 7% Viognier. Yes, they actually co-ferment a small percentage of white wine with this Syrah. La Turque is a powerhouse of a wine that spends an incredible 42 months maturing in new French oak before it's released. This is a wine that's extremely age-worthy and capable of aging effortlessly for decades. It also becomes a truly special wine with decades of aging. So if you can wait, or if you can find a well-preserved bottle with decades of age on it, you're in for a potentially life-changing experience. And so it was with the 1990 Guigal La Turque, which finished number 12 in my top wines of 2024. This wine was absolutely transcendent. It featured an intriguing array of descriptors, including dark cherry, plum, raspberry, black pepper, smoked meat, olive, rosemary, and sage. The mouthfeel was ethereal, and the finish was extraordinarily long, lasting almost a full minute. This is a wine that reminded you with every single sip that you were experiencing something truly special. It's always a special treat and a memorable experience when a wine produced by legendary Burgundy producer Domaine de la Romane Conti is opened. And so to help celebrate a good friend's milestone birthday, we opened a bottle of the 2008 Domaine de la Romane Conti Vin Romane Premier Cru Cuvée du Val Blocher. This is a wine that's been produced less than 10 times, so it's definitely not produced every year. When it is produced, it is made using the fruit from younger vines in Grand Cru vineyards such as Etchezeaux, Grand Etchezeaux, Richebourg, and Romanée Saint-Vivant. Initially reticent, this wine became progressively more vibrant and expressive over the course of the evening as it opened in the glass. Dark cherry, raspberry, Asian five-spice, and floral notes were the dominant descriptors. This wine was intensely concentrated, but balanced by ample acidity. It reminded me of an Etchezeau, but with less polished, more prominent tannins. So this wine came in at number 11 in my top 25 wines of 2024. If you'd like to learn more about legendary Burgundy producer Domaine de la Romane Conti, please be sure to check out this video that's linked above.